Let me call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. Participating here in the City Hall auditorium, I have our newest Board of Finance member, Deb Iancito. I have Lorene Pesky, Christopher Bayes, and James Wright, and participating via Zoom, we have Christopher Anderson. So we do have a quorum. Before we begin our agenda, could we please stand and pledge the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and before we jump into the agenda, I would just like to request a moment of silence for the fallen Bristol police officers. If we could just take a moment and reflect. Thank you. I always feel badly if I don't name the names. Last night at the city council meeting, I made it a point to make sure that we were naming the two officers that did succumb to their injuries. So the Bristol Police Sergeant Dustin DeMonte and Officer Alex Hamsey. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to the community, to the police department, and to their families. So item 1 in our agenda this evening is I would entertain a motion to open the meeting to the public. So moved. Thank
Second.
you. Ms. Pesky, seconded by Mr. Bayes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Anybody from the public? Christopher Anderson is working with papers.
Mute, Chris, mute.
Yes. Thank you. Item 2, I'll entertain a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes from August 16th, 2022.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Bayes. Questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none.
Ms. Pesky was abstained. You were.
I'm abstaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have 2 abstentions. I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the abstentions would go to Ms. Pesky and Ms. Iancito. Right, item 3. This is just discussion. I have to confess, when Heather was reaching out to me and to Robin to ask what we had for the agenda, it's this quiet time of year before all of the, the busy season hits with budgets. But I did not want to cancel another meeting of the Board of Finance. And I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to catch up on what is happening, not only in Robin's department, but with the American Rescue Plan funding. So we can be very quick, but item 3A is just discussion and an update on audit. And I'll turn it over to Robin.
Yes. So the auditors came in last week. They began working on items that have been submitted. We are behind just from, have a learning curve. So we have discussed how we will move forward after they finish their work here. So we, Kim and I will be working closer together instead of addressing individual items separately, so that we can complete items, let them know they can work on it while they're not here, and they will be coming back November 21st to be in the office again. And I feel that we're in a better place now after them being here for the week, and should be able to move forward fairly easily. But it was a bit of a challenge trying to address all of the items prior to them coming in.
So are we just behind on producing documents and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they came in, they provided all their analytics information that they need responses to. So we're going to address all of the items that they asked for while they were here. And then we'll move forward addressing the open items that were on the original list so that we can get the analytics out of the way, because that's a big piece of why things are changing, and providing the backup as to why things have changed. We have a meeting scheduled, I think, in the next week with them and the mayor to discuss moving forward, and then possibly have maybe updated calls every couple weeks until they come back.
I'm just impressed that you're that caught up, because you didn't have a deputy controller for a while. So it's like, you know, I don't blame you for being a little bit behind the ball, you know, even so much. I don't even think it's a learning curve. Probably it's just, you know, you didn't have the help for a while, and thank God Kim's here now, but you know, you didn't have that help for a while, and it was kind of a busy May through July, close August, you know, so
yeah, we ran into some
totally understandable.
Trying to figure out the close that took us extra time, so that set us back from beginning to work on the audit items. I feel like the Wednesday night was like a pivotal night in the week, and thought, how can we move forward positively now? So Thursday came back in, had a discussion with them, decided to kind of address things differently, and I feel like that's going to make a difference. Where I felt like Gina did certain things and Alice did certain things, and that's what we were going to do. Right. They have great backup, and but I think that was expecting a lot, without having more experience behind us.
Yeah, they were both here for what?
Decades.
Probably 40 years combined.
Decades.
I mean,
yes.
a long time. So.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. No, I'm sorry. I
think at the
last meeting.
Yes.
Lorraine
I missed
wasn't.
it.
Yeah, Lorraine wasn't here.
I apologize.
No.
Hi, I'm Kim Aviles. I'm the deputy controller for Robin. Today's 6 months for me.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Not only is it a learning curve coming into a position new, being without a deputy who is essentially your right arm for a period of time, but also keep in mind that we were also saddled with doing ARPA reporting. So in April and July.
Yeah.
So additional reporting that prior comptrollers didn't have to do. I think these audit processes and the amount of work that gets done in this department has changed significantly. And I would even go so far as to say that given the circumstances, with a fresh set of eyes, looking at how things are being done, and also maybe assessing how can they be improved or done differently, is an advantage. So when we get through this audit, we've already talked about maybe starting this budget process a little bit earlier this year, having the department heads submit in December as opposed to January. This gives us an opportunity to meet with each department head before the budget subcommittee gets the budgets and starts reviewing. So more than a learning curve, I think an assessment on how things run really well, how things are running, so that could be tweaked, and then where there are some opportunities for improvement.
Do they have, is the auditor person the same? Do we build up a rapport with a certain guy that do they send different men or women out every time, or do you get kind of a working relationship over time with these people?
Mm-hmm. So Leslie's been the partner on our account we've had him for 4 years, I think. Jess came on last year, the manager. She, so I worked with her in Middlebury, so I was familiar with her and knew her well. So she's here again this year. And Brandon also worked with him in Middlebury. He's been here for a number of years.
Yeah, so say I did my interview with him for a couple of years.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So they're
same
great.
person.
Then they bring in their help, their additional staff to help through the audit. So yeah, I don't have a problem with any of them. I think they're great. They're reasonable. Sometimes they're a little hard on us when I feel like I should have a little bit more leniency, but, but I understand. I mean, that's their job. So, you know, there have been a lot of changes. Mayor talked about ARPA, but in addition to that, the state has a new website for reporting. I know the assessor has new reporting requirements in the tax office. So we're running into a situation where items that were done by hand, signed off on, uploaded, and emailed to somebody at the state are now being uploaded into portals. So your internal controls, your processes are a little different. So they want to make sure we are continuing to have that dual control involved in the information that we're uploading. So those are little things that had there been more time, we could have addressed those items. But so, you know, moving forward, we know what we need to do, and I'm sure more will come, but I feel better about it now than I did earlier last week.
When's the completion?
So it's due December 31st. Realistically speaking, I'm not sure that's going to happen. They have the majority of their clients are finalizing in December, with CLA being the new, from Bloom to CLA. Our group needs 2 weeks to review, and then it goes to the national review for 2 weeks. So it's almost a whole month of reviewing. So if I don't have everything to them by Thanksgiving, we wouldn't be able to have a report for December 31st. But if we have if we're going out for bonding, we need our audit. So if we needed an extra month, I think we're still okay. And I'm hoping that we would be able to do it within that period of time. Have it completed by January 31st.
And I would just remind the board that I think for the last 3 or 4 years, we have consistently been on extension.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm for sure 3 years.
I don't remember it until like February usually.
Correct. Yeah. So the first extension we request is a 30-day. That would take us to the end of January. So I believe we were pretty successful in getting that wrapped up with that first extension. But last year we ended up on extension. Yeah. I look at Dan as I say this because I think Dan got on the phone and said, we can't go out to bond until you have this audit done. So get it done. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. So this is not uncommon. And even in CLA or Bloom Shapiro's world, I honestly think that they have so many clients that they can't possibly get to all of these clients within that time period. And they are struggling to find auditors.
Yeah.
They're up against the same struggles we are with workforce and qualified.
And where Brandon went from 6 accounts last year, he's up to 12 this year.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So they're very, their time is.
Yeah. It is a perfect storm of a lot of work to do, learning curve, additional responsibilities, changes of processes. And I think that if there's one saving grace in all of this, it is that the Board of Education did decide that they were not going to move forward with their migration to a new, finance software. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Robin, Kim, we brought Cheryl into that meeting, and everybody, just said, this is all of the reasons why you can't just try to, rush this thing through. And Susan Lebomsky was right there. She said, "You're right. This isn't going to work." So they did back off of that. So fingers crossed. If and when that comes up again, we're all together on it. If there's a need to move to a new software system that is that has upgrades and bells and whistles that benefit both of us, I'm hoping that we'll all be on the same page and move together.
Well, these systems just weren't even compatible, right? I mean, that's what they just weren't, they don't communicate with each other. And we kind of knew that from the beginning, and I'm glad to see is where it is, but.
Yeah. And that's where having that feedback from more than just your comptroller, but the whole team, the treasurer's assistant, deputy treasurer, who does the reconciliation of all of the deposits, and that feedback from everybody from the department, I think, was instrumental, so that they clearly recognize that real time being a week later, we'll print out a report for you, doesn't work when you're trying to reconcile accounts. And the time between the beginning of the month and the end of the month is getting shorter every year.
Especially in the midst of a building project.
All of that.
High school.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So, so that's an update on audit. Other questions for Robin on audit or for Kim?
It's always Lance's question, so you can always.
Lance was, yeah,
Lance was
no
always,
pressure.
How about the audit? So that can be your question.
That'll be my.
I think the only other thing that I would add is to the credit of Robin's leadership in the department. Robin attended a GFOA conference last month, and Kim and Robin both attended a conference. Yes, was it yesterday? Yeah. So taking advantage of those conferences, learning curves, and networking. I think, did you tell me Bill Lindsay from our Bill Lindsay was there? And
Yeah, Bill Lindsay was there yesterday at the GFOA conference, and the New England States GFOA conference in September. Our auditors were there. Steve Lemansky from Hooker and Holcomb was there. So it was a great networking event, and lots of really great sessions, lots of information to bring back and start to implement here. Yeah, there were, succession training, lots of talk about where the economy is going, working with different generations, in the workforce, internal controls, GASB updates, budgeting, different types of budgeting, all things I've heard before, but these had, it's been years, so through the years, things evolve. It was really some good information that came out of it. Yesterday's conference included George Raphael from CCM, who provided a little update on where the state will be going and with the budgets this year. I have a PDF I forwarded to the mayor. If anybody else is interested in some interesting reading. It was very informative. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was great.
So all of these things, although you hear things over and over again, there are certain points where it really clicks, and so I feel like I'm really getting a lot out of these. And I think we can, implement a lot of what was presented at these conferences this time.
okay, thank you, Robin. Discussion item 3B is the update on ARPA committee. It's more than just an update on the ARPA committee. This is more or less an update on all things ARPA. Last week, we received communication from Congressman Larson's office that he was looking for a general update on everything that had been happening since the city was notified that they were going to be receiving funds. So this was a good opportunity for me to go back into all of the steps that we have taken since the American Rescue Plan was adopted in March of 2021. So the first thing on your package that I handed out this evening is just a timeline. I'm sorry, here. Kim, if you wish. So as you can see, from March of 2021 to October of 2022, that's 18 months. A lot has happened. You know, when you receive word that you're going to be receiving a little over $10 million and you're giving an interim rule or guidance document that's 350 pages long, which pretty much tells you there are only 3 ways you can spend this money, and it's very difficult for you to quantify the spending in any one of those 3 areas of focus. We made the quick decision that we were going to wait for further clarification and guidance from the U.S. Treasury. So from May of 2021 through I believe it was January of 2022, that interim rule was the standing guiding document that every municipality that was meeting with any of the delegation was, you know, just echoing the same thing. This is not clear enough. You know, even the methodology for determining lost revenue was just not clear enough. We need more, we need better guidance. We need examples of how these funds can be spent. And after listening to all of that for the better part of 6 months, the US Treasury did release their final rule, which was a 437-page document. And they allowed for the standard allowance for every municipality or recipient of these funds. That would be counties, municipalities. I think there were some other sovereign nations that also qualified for receiving the funds. The standard allowance was that you could claim up to $10 million as lost revenue. And that became the game changer for the city of Torrington. Once we were allowed that option, it loosened up, I should say, the guidance and the spending capacity, how we could put these funds back to work for the community. So that document came out in January of 2022. In February, the City Council received and reviewed a strategic spending plan. And we developed a Google survey to send the proposed spending plan out to the public, to have the public weigh in and give us feedback as to whether we were hitting the market or if we were missing, if there was something that the community felt was a higher priority. That survey and strategic spending plan, draft strategic spending plan, sat, in this public process of gaining input for a little over a month, 6 weeks. And in April, we had a public informational hearing and presentation at the City Council meeting. That was when the standard allowance, the council did vote to adopt the standard allowance and claim the 10 million as lost revenue. And the council also reviewed the survey results and the strategic spending plan. And that now gave us a path forward as to how to put these funds to work. I will tell you the proposed spending plan that was put before the council was a combination of all of the work and information that we had been gathering during the pandemic when we were meeting with businesses and daycare centers and the faith-based community and the not-for-profits, and we were getting their feedback as to where their gaps were, what were, when you're closed down for 90 days or 180 days, what is the impact? What did you lose? How can we restore or get you back up and running? So all of that backup data was collected during those weekly, we were calling them, a public Zoom public forums where they would, town halls, where they would tell us what was going on in their industry and where they could work together and work with the city. So that coupled with the department heads' feedback was the foundation for the strategic spending plan. Council did approve that in April. We recognized right away with that strategic plan, which by the way, the strategic plan is in the survey, is immediately following this timeline. You'll see the survey results with comments from the public as to what they felt priority should be. Then behind that, you'll start seeing all of the memos that Tarista Malanka, who has been charged with taking the lead on shepherding all of the strategic spending, our ARPA advisory committee. And in this mix of papers, which you can read at your convenience, you'll see that the proposed budget that was approved by the council, strategic spending plan, and those priority items, areas of priority were sort of flushed out. You know, what does it mean when we say we want to send funds out for community impact grants? Or what does it mean when we say we want sub-grant administration or workforce navigator or social care providers? So each one of those areas of priority we fleshed out, we put a little meat on the bones as to what those meant based on the feedback that we had received. And then we developed the budget, which I said is in here, but admittedly, I'm not finding it immediately. So, so in April, the council has adopted a strategic spending plan. This is a plan. It is, and we made sure that they understood that the plan was a living, breathing document, you know, that we should be able to pivot if we find that you don't need $3 million to do radio upgrades. You only need, you know, $1.8 million, that we would be able to go back into the spending plan and reappropriate whatever funds were not being utilized in the plan that was adopted. Right after that, we recognized that the real work needed to be done, and it really needed to be a focused committee. And so the following meeting of the council on the 18th of April, we went back to the council and asked to have an ARPA advisory committee formulated. And that committee would be responsible for reviewing the spending plan and each of the areas of focus, and formulate recommendations that would go back to the council for approval. The committee was established. We selected representation from each of the boards. City Council is Ann Ruette. The Board of Finance is Lorene Pesky. Board of Safety is Molly Spino. The Board of Education is John Kisko. Our Parks and Recs Commission is Casey McKenna. And Planning and Zoning Commission is the only board that we were not able to recruit somebody who could make the commitment. But we did feel comfortable moving forward with the 5 boards being represented. And those boards honestly have been doing a tremendous amount of work, especially lately, meeting every week, diving into grant applications, reading through every grant application, every budget. How does it fit with the parameters and intentions of the community impact? And then making very difficult decisions and formulating a recommendation. And at this point, I just want to turn it over to Lorene, and she could talk a little bit about her perspective as a committee member.
I said at our last meeting, I originally thought that I was struggling to learn the program that the Community Foundation had put forward for us. It's what they use, and then we, the committee, decided on what we wanted to look for what people needed to include in their applications, all of that. And it's a wonderful tool. It's absolutely wonderful. I don't know. So I thought I was struggling to learn how to do that, but that's not what I was really struggling with. What I was struggling with was the tremendous need that there is in the city of Torrington. And that how many people need help of various sorts. And that's what's really bothering my heart, is that we can't do all of it. We can't give everybody the money that they're requesting. The requests have been many, varied, and unusual. They're very interesting to see what people are trying to do. And what we did was try to prioritize some of them that needed to get ourselves into it. We started with under $15,000 requests. Those were small. We could get our heads around them and learn how we worked together too. And then now we're on tomorrow. We'll be dealing with the end of the big money, and we've done facade grants. We've worked on the workforce navigator. That's going to be very interesting. And they're at City Council, they approved that this week. It was there were only 2 applicants for that: the Northwest Workforce Investment Board and Primetime, and each brought to them to the request. Their proposals had such good parts, and the mayor came up with a very good solution to it. And we're going to be able to have a contract with each of them to provide. The Workforce Investment Board has so much more resources beyond that federal money and things that they can bring. They just haven't. And we were all of us, I think, were concerned that should we really go with them, because if we still have this unemployment rate in the city of Torrington, which we do, why should we give money to somebody who hasn't done that much for Torrington? But the one aspect of the committee work that is very satisfying is we can say it has to be Torrington people. It has to be Torrington businesses. You have to help Torrington. And that was the point that the Workforce Investment Board was able to communicate to us, that they can focus on Torrington and then bring all the other expertise that they have and resources to it. And then Primetime can work. A lot of people who want to go back to work, but there's that, but what about my benefits? If I go to work, am I going to lose my health care? Am I going to lose my rent assistance and my food assistance? And that's exactly what Primetime does. So they're going to take care of that aspect, because the Workforce Investment Board doesn't and can't do that. So it was the perfect result for us. And it's a very good working group. Everybody brings their different perspectives to it. And the people from, I don't know what we would do without the Community Foundation.
I know, yeah.
The work that, and Rista, what Rista, how she does everything that she does, and keeps a handle on it and keeps us in line. And it's not that any of us don't have other things going on or aren't at that, but everybody has been committed to it. And tomorrow will be interesting, because that's a lot of money left. Yep. That we're going to. So we'll be back at you.
Exactly.
With the rest of it. Where it goes.
So if I could just say one thing, when Brandon was here and he was auditing ARPA specifically, he went and spoke with Rista, and the smile that came over his face after talking to her and listening to everything that she's doing he was able to breeze right through all of it. And he actually thought she was a grant administrator, not economic development. So, you know, he was just so impressed with how everything was being recorded. And, you know, even from the beginning of the process through to the end when we're actually giving out the money, you know, and then the backup, you know, all of the paperwork that goes along with it. He was just so, yeah, he was really impressed with everything that she had. So
the two things when we were formulating the strategic spending plan, the two things I kept saying to everybody in the room is, the first is, let's try to stay true to the intent of the legislation. You know, this was intended to spark economic development. It was intended to get people back to work. It was intended to address some of the mental health issues, the educational issues. They gave you a more latitude in spending in certain census tracts where you have a lower socioeconomic population. So that was number one. We wanted to make sure that we were hitting those targets and trying to stay true to that legislation. And the second thing I kept saying is, even after realizing that we could take the standard allowance and claim 10 million of the 10,074,000 as lost revenue, I said, let's make sure we're threading this needle as if all those rules still exist. Let's document the heck out of this thing. I want to see the application. I want to see the budget. I want to see every minute or documentation minutes that are taken at the council meetings that are all made a part of the file. So if somebody comes in and they ask about that $9,000 that we gave to this little dance studio, that we can say, this was the grant application, this was the deliverable, this is the report out, you know, these were, you know, the minutes of the meetings where this was all approved, that we couldn't possibly get ourselves into any trouble with that. And to Robin's point, Rista she's just made for that. She recognizes the value in that. And for this Board of Finance, you will see, you did see in last year's budget that I budgeted for half a year to get some support for her in her department. You will see in the next budget that that will be a full-time position for her, because this is a lot of work. And even once all these funds are expended, there's still so much work that needs to be done. And we can't, the city, the size of Torrington can't continue to exist in a one-person economic development office. So,
and what we've done is divide the money that this committee is responsible for into two halves, 875,000 now that we're working off of, and 875,000 will be the second round. So even people whose requests may not have passed, that they can come back to us. Maybe they were missing some information, or maybe now that we're a little bit further into it, they can refine their request. So that, and we're going to be that much better at handing it out too.
Doesn't the ARPA funding allow for ARPA and an ARPA administrator? And we had discussed.
We did, and I do apologize. I copied all of these documents. I was so sure that I had the strategic spending plan that was approved by the council, but I'm not finding it in this. So I will email that just to remind everybody what that strategic spending plan looked like. So yes, so you'll see in here as I walked through the timeline, the council did approve an MOU with the Northwest Community Foundation for grant administration. When we talk about grant administration for just the community impact grants, we talk about somebody who's releasing the grant parameters, you know, qualifications, receiving the grant, vetting the grants, making sure that it's all, and then uploading it into this software, this platform that the ARPA committee was then able to access and review and score in accordance with a matrix that was also approved by the council. So we do have funds for that. You know, what you see on this page with the actions and timeline, the strategic spending plan itemized how we're going to spend all $10 million. This timeline only, and the promise to the council when they approved the guardrails, the strategic spending plan, was nothing will be expended until and unless the council approves it. So every recommendation that comes out of the ARPA advisory board is a recommendation to the council. So what you see are two columns here: what was authorized by the council, and then what has been approved or expended to date. This doesn't total 10 million.
Right.
Because of that 10 million, we also had $1 million for the animal control facility. We have $3 million for radio upgrades for the police department, fire department, public works department. We have improvements to the Sullivan Senior Center. We had improvements to the Armory. We have improvements to Cole Park. So there are other infrastructure improvements that haven't happened yet, that haven't been brought back to the council for approval, but all $10 million will be spent.
Right, but I thought that I thought that some of this money, I thought we're going to bring an ARPA administrator in to.
Yes, early in, that was the thought, was we need to bring in an administrator, you know,
So
so
basically
that
Rista's doing that work instead.
once we were able to adopt the standard allowance, it did make a lot of this much easier. So it is far easier than some of the onerous reporting, because those quarterly reports that we talked about a little bit earlier, that are additional reports that the finance department is doing, Rista would have had to provide all of that backup data, all of those T's and I's crossed and dotted for every single one of those reports, and this loosened that up. So, so we did not hire that individual, but there are still funds in there to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if we can take some of that work off of Rista in the meantime, and we have those ARPA funds to bring in somebody who's just going to strictly administer ARPA, you know, beyond the community foundation, because they're really just in charge of expending the grants, right, after they're approved. So if we have the ability to do that, and it takes some off Rista's plate so she can, you know, do more economic development things, I think that's wise.
Sure, we can go back in. And I think the reason that Rista has enjoyed doing some of this is a lot of it is economic development. You know, a lot of it is the small businesses, you know, that are in her office, meeting with her, identifying, you know, what those gaps are for them, where their lost revenues were or lost workforce. But that is an excellent suggestion, and we can, because it was in the strategic spending plan, I think it was $64,000 that we had set aside for that, and $45,000 was set aside for the community foundation. To your point, what the community foundation is doing for us is a heavy lift. There is a tremendous amount of paperwork that there is no way even an office of 4 could do what the foundation is doing for us. And only recently did we learn, after getting council approval in early September, to fund the first 9 grants. Then there was the back and forth as to who was cutting the check. And the foundation found out that if they were to issue the checks, because some of the checks are going to for-profit organizations, it changes their auditing process. It ratchets it up a level, and it would cost them more money annually, not only during the reporting year, but for years afterwards, because that's how audits go. You know, you get a finding in your first year, you're paying for that finding for 3 to 5 years after that. So, so even as recently as this past week, we were still ferreting out the details of who's going to cut the checks and who's getting the vendor paperwork and who's doing all of that. And we did split the baby with the foundation. We will be, the city of Torrington will be issuing those checks. And honestly, I'm not sure from the ARPA advisory committee's point of view, but I kind of feel like it's a nice opportunity for us to invite those recipients to a meeting with a check presentation so that, number one, they understand this came out of the American Rescue Plan, because quite frequently people apply for grants and they're not even really sure where the funding is coming from. And it came from the city of Torrington. It came from the decisions that were made by these boards to, how the funds were going to be expended. What were the priorities? So
we discussed our last meeting about having a separate city council meeting, just to kind of, do a little bit of this, because this is, the facade grants that we've been able to do, and so that people can realize when they drive up and down Prospect Street was this latest, a lot of them, and East Main Street in the previous round, what money is going for, and as it goes along, how many kids are getting to join a dance group, or perhaps sing that didn't, or get some extra mental health, or getting some of our social service agencies to work together on some projects. Those were things that got a lot of support from the five of us when they could show that they were going to work with each other on projects. So, and some of the things we did also, so we're hoping that money piece of getting it to people can be expedited, because we made us also a special point of approving and then getting to the council for their approval, things that had to do with time sensitive, the Colangelo fields and the soccer fields, things that, if we can get the seed in the ground now, that we have that much better chance of really taking hold.
And I think the only thing, and I'm not sure if I've already said this, but the only thing that I would like to share with the board is the first community impact grant round of $875,000 was opened up with funding requests. It was closed, and at the time of the close, there were 54 applications with total grant requests of $2,883,555. $2,833,555. So talk about splitting the baby, trying to get a little bit of something to, those top priorities and help those that can't be funded because they didn't fit the parameters of this grant round, but do qualify for another grant round. So when
and that's where the foundation has come in and helping to advise the people who are requesting the grants.
Yeah. And this is where, when you hear Lorene say the difficulty was recognizing the vast need, I think the difficulty also was, how do we say no? Because that need is just as great as, a business that was shuttered for, 3 months. So I think that this committee is owed a debt of gratitude for the thoughtfulness in their diligence in doing this. And I also did the scoring of those grants, although I was not a voting member. And I did that on purpose. I just felt it was important for these decisions to be made by board members and not, by a mayor. But I did score the applications. It's almost heartbreaking when you're trying to say, this is a better application than any of the others, because they were all good. I think the one application that really struck me was the applicant submitted a request for, and I'm just going to make the number up, I don't know, $87,553.78. And I said that even the applicants agonized over what they were asking for. they didn't want to be, he wasn't going to round that up. He wasn't going to ask for 88,000. They asked for what they needed. And that really resonated with me and the committee. So huge exercise in patience and charity and community. And I'm grateful for the committee and everybody that has any influence over any of this. So I'll keep this timeline a living, breathing document. I'll keep bringing it back to the Board of Finance. And even though there are no decisions that need to be made by the board, I do think that as a Board of Finance, when you're making those other tough decisions about how the taxpayers are going to afford something, I think this gives us a little bit of light as to what are the needs, what are the struggles, and and where are there other resources that might be.
In light of this, I was wondering if it might be appropriate for us to have a joint meeting with Board of Finance, with City Council, and with the Board of Ed, right before, because in November, because we're going to start the whole budget nightmare all over again, and to understand what we've taken care of and what we haven't taken care of this way, and what we and I mean the Board of Ed has spent a tremendous amount of money on some very important things, and for all of us to know as we go into preparing the next budget and what we're going to be able to afford or not afford, and with the school coming on, that we all kind of talk about all this together and know, so that we're all on the same page. So it's not something that ends up when we're in May and, well, what about, didn't we do that with ARPA? Didn't we do this with ARPA and all that stuff?
Yes.
It would,
I sure.
think it would be helpful.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. We can definitely do that. So any questions or any suggestions when it comes to ARPA? Because when I did total this, we're about $3.5 million of authorized and expended. And we'll be going into the beginning of next year, hitting up those other infrastructure investments. The radio system, the police department did, I think, finally wrap up their review of where radio signals were weak, and they feel satisfied at this point to move forward with the state radio system. There are funds that we would like to start to mobilize for the public safety complex that we desperately need in the city of Torrington. The police station, more firehouses, headquarters is in need, but the police station it's just woefully inadequate. So we want to start getting that feasibility study, and that I'm hoping will lay groundwork for us to do one of the community impact, the CIF, Community Improvement Funds 2030, which is a state grant opportunity for distressed municipalities. So we want to get that done so we can do a CIF 2030 application. But quite a bit of work to do. Deadline for appropriating all of these funds is December 31st of 2024, and we must spend it all by December 31st, 26. Yes. So I thought it would be fun spending this, and it hasn't been.
Yeah, I think my only comment and suggestion would be, the community is doing a lot of great work. Bruce is doing a lot of great work, but if we have that money to expend that ARPA administrator to kind of take some of the load off for stuff. Yep. And I know she probably loves doing it, and I'm sure because it is tied to economic development, but at the end of the day, if there's somebody else that can do the brunt work, like the non-economic development part of it, and she can continue to do a lot of the great things that she's doing, it's only going to benefit us. So, yep. And I also like the idea that the checks are coming from the city, because that, kind of just puts things in perspectives and says, hey, we are here to help, and this money is going to the community. and it's coming from, from the federal government, but from the city at this point. So
Right.
That would be my only recommendation.
I agree.
Yeah, although we are taking the revenue loss as, and that eliminates a lot of the reporting in the ARPA portal.
Right.
It doesn't eliminate us doing all of our own audit work.
Yeah.
To make sure we have all of the.
But can they help with that?
When we
Yes.
are audited.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
So bringing that person in, even if it were for 15 hours a week, or something like that, or you may need them for more than that, but
Yeah.
I
I don't think it would be 15 hours. It might be 15 a month.
which would be
I think we could do
great.
that.
If that saves Robin's office and Rissa's office 15 hours a month, by bringing that person in, then I think that's well worth it.
Okay. Yep. Excellent suggestion. All right, if there are no other questions or discussion on this, I'll move into item 4, and I'll entertain a motion to consider business by department heads.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
By Mr. Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so I know you kind of ran the gamut. Is there anything else that you needed to add today?
No, I think I have to finalize the census information and get that over to Fiducian. So once we have our new reports, we can schedule a meeting for them to present them. I know we usually do them in November. It's probably not going to happen until later this year, but it's for the July 1, 2022.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's just it's just part of everything that's happening right now. So as soon as I can finalize that, hopefully this week.
Okay.
And then they'll be able to get them together. They know, originally we thought we needed them for the audit, but we don't because the audit ends June 30th. And then just another piece of the audit that we took up a lot of our time was the GASB 87 update. It's a lease, capital lease, new requirement where you have to pull in all of your leases as a lessor and a lessee. So we had many meetings going through what are these agreements that the city has with other organizations, and both ways where we're receiving the funds and we're paying the expenses. So
We don't have too many of those, do we?
no, but we have to do an analysis and a calculation to see if it will impact our financials and over for future. So we still have provided the information. We just haven't dove into that yet. I don't know how much it's going to, how much additional work that will be, but that was a big part of this year's audit. So that took a lot of time too while we were supposed to be preparing for the audit. That was one piece that we spent a lot of time on. So those are two. I think everything else, we covered everything else.
Anything you can think of, Kim?
No, I'm learning a lot as I go.
Yeah.
So, but the big thing is, you want to be consistent, you want to give the information, and I'm stepping into a role that was held by someone who was there for a while. So when I report going forward, I have to see what has transpired in the past and then report. So that's just taking extra time because you don't, you want to be consistent, you want to be accurate, so that's kind of what's been going on, and but it's making a lot more sense as I go through the audit. A lot of things are making a lot more sense as I go through it. But
I always say that it's 3 years. You need to do it 3 times before you feel like, okay, I think I know this now.
Yeah, it's a lot, and you have a lot of funds and a lot of, is it state revenue? Is it this revenue? Is that revenue? I have to learn all that. It's not something that you just walk in with. So, and Gina left a great trail and a great record and everything. So it's been good, but you almost have to do it twice.
Yep. Well,
and then hope you.
Well, we appreciate the work that you're putting in, both of you.
Thank you.
Anything, Dan, from the treasurer's office?
Yeah, sure. Just
talking about the finance department. So in the last 18 months, 24 months, our department is 50% fewer people that are there through either retirement or vacancies. So half of the new people here, I just want to say that they're working extremely hard and they're doing a great job. And we're lucky to have them.
Thank you.
And second, I'd like to say congratulations to Deb. I think the mayor made a great appointment. She'll be an asset to this board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan,
Yes.
you, a couple of, it wasn't this past meeting, but it was the meeting before the city council. You talked about the investment money that you had moved around.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So I haven't told the board here. So our revenue account was with a particular bank that we had been doing business with for quite some time, but I was able to move funds from their bank to another bank that generated almost 3 times the amount of interest, or actually a little more than 3 times the amount of interest that we were earning. And I met with some bankers again today. It looks like we found another source that's going to even be 3 times that amount. So it's something that I'm looking into. I'll discuss it with Robin and the mayor, and we'll be back to you. But with rates rising the way they are, I really have to pay attention to it. It makes a huge difference in our revenue account.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the difference from the last change went from earning about $40,000 a year in interest to close to $500,000.
I was just getting ready to say that. I know
Yeah.
it's almost $500,000 just moving that money.
And if we do with the discussion that I had today, it'll probably be 3 times that at least.
Yes,
So,
we need that.
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
And Heather, anything from the city clerk's office? Absentee ballots. I know. I was walking back in prior to the meeting and was watching the box full of absentee ballots going into the mailroom. So, all right. Moving on to item 5, I'll entertain a motion considered by mayor and members.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So starting to my left, anything this evening, Mr. Wright?
No, I can't think of anything.
Mr. Baez?
No, I just want to welcome Deb. Obviously, she came in at a quiet time, but I promise you it's not all that quiet once the first of the year rolls around. So you'll be very excited to indulge into that, but welcome. And thank you, Ms. Pesky, for your work on the ARPA committee. I know I've talked to Molly and John and a few other members on there, and they're really proud of the work they did there too. So thank you. And I know there'll be more, so it's not over yet, but yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baez. Ms. Pesky?
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Anything this evening? Yep.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And we lost Chris. That's all right. All right, there being no further business before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Baez.
Sorry.
Second by Mr. Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.